Hello. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Heather Warner Finley, and I'd like to welcome you on the behalf of the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association. We sure are glad to see you guys and have you come out. We would like to start out. I would like to introduce Dr. David Sheremy with the Bayou Vermilion District, our partner and our host for this evening.
Thank you, Heather. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see everybody here for the State of the River Symposium here. This is several years we've been doing this in collaboration with the BVPA, which has been existing for 5 years. And as we're going to see from some of the presentations later on that we've made a lot of progress, not only since 1984 when BVD was founded, and we recognize the importance of a clean waterway here in Lafayette Parish, but in the last 5 years also, or so, that we made a lot of headway also, and especially ever since, I would say, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, it's one of these silver lining kind of deals, since the flood of August 2016. I think people have really come together now to understand the importance of a coordinated effort across parish lines to help prevent and mitigate any future floods, because as you know, this is going to happen again, and as we've seen from recent studies, this is with greater frequency. And to that, just to let you know that last night we had our Bayou Vermilion District Board of Commissioners meeting, and they passed a resolution. If you don't mind, I'll read it kind of quickly to you. It's not that long. It says, resolution, at the meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Bayou Vermilion District on May 23rd, the following resolution was proposed and approved by the board. Whereas the purpose of the BVD includes improving the water quality and of beautifying Bayou Vermilion in the parish of Lafayette in an effort to promote the bayou as a recreational and cultural asset, and doing any and all other acts that would enhance the general condition of the Bayou Vermilion. And whereas the area floods of August 2016 brought to the forefront the need to develop a coordinated regional approach to flood prevention and mitigation. And whereas the BVD board applauds the Acadian group of the Sierra Club and the work of Messrs. Dixon and Scheffler have done in preparing several reports and presentations, including the regional flooding frequency analysis from 1940 to 2018 in the Teche Vermilion watershed. And whereas the BVD board acknowledges the presentation by Messrs. Dave Dixon and Harold Scheffler on behalf of the Acadian group of the Sierra Club, such presentation having been made to the BVD board at its meeting on February 28th, 2018, and delineating the following regional flood prevention recommendations. Number one, encouraging the U.S. Corps of Engineers to implement the Cocodrie-Coutable flood plan as part of the current Atchafalaya Basin Plan, including enlarging gates at the West Atchafalaya Spillway and Borrow Pit levees. Two, directing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to maintenance dredge the Vermilion River to the depth and width of the original 1950s dredging. Further, to conduct an annual inspection to ensure that this bayou depth and width is maintained. Three, support efforts by St. Martin Parish to drain Cypress Island Swamp into the Bayou Teche below the Keystone Dam. Four, request the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers open the Keystone locks on an experimental basis to evaluate changes in river stages, water quality impacts, and other benefits. This step would determine if a permanent floodgate at the Keystone Lock and Dam would be needed, and if this process can be utilized as an interim flood control measure until more permanent mitigation efforts can be undertaken. Five, place 2 drains into Lake Martin, allowing this lake to become part of the Cypress Island retention zone. 6, support efforts by the St. Mary Parish officials and coastal zone management authorities to maintenance dredge the principal outlet of the Teche Vermilion system, the Jaws outlet to West Côte Blanche Bay, presently closed, forcing this water 20 plus miles west to Vermilion Bay. And 7, develop and execute a regional flood prevention operational plan. Whereas the BVD board recognizes that the Acadian group of the Sierra Club shares BVD's vision of seeking cost-efficient, easily attainable, and common-sense solutions to the problem of area flooding that appears to have grown more frequent over time, as demonstrated in their presentation. And whereas the BVD board also recognizes that the Acadian group of the Sierra Club shares the BVD's vision of improving water quality and environmental integrity of the Bayou Vermilion watershed. Therefore, be it resolved that the BVD Board of Commissioners supports the concept of flood control actions that have minimal environmental impacts on the Bayou Vermilion watershed, and that we will be glad to work with the Acadiana group of the Sierra Club to coordinate and implement such actions and make them part of an overall regional plan, as long as we believe that such actions will be effective in reducing flooding without causing significant negative impacts to environmental resources of the watershed. That resolution was passed last night, and just this morning I was able to get some updates from one of our commissioners who had to abstain from this resolution because her father is in it. But it was approved in there. I'm sure she would have voted for it, but it was approved unanimously with one abstention. And Ms. Catherine Scheffler-Como writes this, like magic, after we adopted the resolution to conditionally support the Acadian group of the Sierra Club's regional flood prevention recommendations, I received an update from them. I thought you would like to hear about the recommendations, how they're progressing. Number 2, the maintenance dredge to Bayou Vermilion. It will be funded for the 2018-2019 fiscal year with federally allocated maintenance funds. Number 5 would be to place 2 drains in Lake Martin. It will be funded by the Wallop Bro Fund. I don't know who Mr. Wallop is, but I'm pretty sure I know that John's first name was probably, Bro's first name was probably John Bro. Was set up in 1983 as an enhancement to fund and support fisheries and outdoor activities. And number 7, develop and execute a regional flood prevention operational plan, and it is, of course, being worked on. And we will have a meeting on June 13th. Mr. Harrell just spoke to me about that in New Orleans with the New Orleans District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, so with Colonel Clancy and Mark Wingate. So things are moving right along, people. I think we can applaud for all the work that has been quickly done. Like I always say, it's amazing what a natural disaster will do to make you, give you a sense of urgency, because we never want to see this again, at least not in our lifetimes and not for many lifetimes to come. So without further ado, I'd like to once again welcome you over here and continue the program and turn it over to Heather. Thank you.
Wow, David, thanks. You guys, you heard it first here. How about that? What we'd like to do now, we're the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association, and we'd like to talk to you a little bit about who we are and what our mission is, and kind of what we're going to do tonight. And so to do that, we have our president, Ms. Bess Foray, who she'll speak to us.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out. I'm really excited that we have this crowd here tonight. Just for, like Heather said, a little short history of the BVPA. In 2013, became a nonprofit volunteer group. It was through the Garden Club had a project to protect aquatic ecosystems, and they won a national award for that. And Jan and Charlie Wyatt then took that idea and really started running with it to get this group going. And shortly after that, a 501c3 was established. And the current, the board, I've been on the board for several years now, and we have a wide variety of different kind of people who are on the board. But we came up with the kind of a mission statement for what we're all about, and it's that the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association is to create awareness of our natural environment by providing education and outreach to the general community about ways to conserve, protect, and enjoy the Bayou Vermilion watershed. So it's not just the portion of the Vermilion that runs through Lafayette Parish. It is the whole watershed and all of the coulees and bayous and everything that drains into that we want to really get people aware of and the resource that it can be for our community. Our current board, just to also let y'all know the names, and that a lot of them are here tonight and that work so hard to get a lot of our programs going. You're going to hear about those later. Kelia Bingham is the vice president. Babette Werner is the secretary. Jackie Vargas Beitia is the treasurer. Heather Warner Finley, Dr. David Cheremy, Sarah Shuffler, Donald Segrera, Dr. Ernest Giroir, Jeff Jackson, Bob Love, and Dr. Durga Pudel. We also have a pretty large advisory board, which are listed on our website. It's over 30 members right now, which are they're there to kind of lend their expertise in different areas when we need some advice or some other ideas about what we can do, whether they're political or they're professors at UL that help us out a lot with that too. We do want to plug any of you that are here tonight that are not current members of the BVPA. We really urge you to become a member, and you can go to our website and easily register either as an individual, a student, family membership too. And you're going to see what those membership dues. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about, not only the state of the river, but what the dues and what we're doing that are helping to protect the state of the river right now. We also, and we highly urge anyone, even if you don't want to necessarily become a member now, our meetings are on the first Monday of every month at 4. They're here at Vermilionville, and so if anyone wants to come and kind of see what those are like, you're welcome to do so. We have committee meetings too, to talk about our sampling programs, marketing, education, and our annual symposium that we organize every year that's going to be coming up in September. Like I mentioned, this is not just for Lafayette Parish, it's for the whole watershed. And something else that we've really been proud of is trying to get the Vermilion River Alliance going and keeping going quarterly meetings. All the different parishes, St. Landry, St. Martin, Vermilion, and Lafayette host. And we get different entities and politicians and elected officials and everybody from those different parishes to come. And the soil and water conservation groups, if you're not familiar with what they do, and it's a lot of farmers, and they're really a big part of it now, and they help sponsor some of those events, and we get to learn all kind of interesting things about how they're handling. They utilize the watershed for their farms, and then it's like what is also running off of their farms, and we get to learn a lot from them, and the VRA is a really important part of an offshoot of the BVPA. So we are here to help facilitate different individuals and public and private entities to work together for our watershed. Right now, we're going to have the next part of our presentation where Jackie and Kelia are going to come talk to you about some of the other things that are going on right now with our programs and in the Vermilion River watershed. Thank you all so much for coming.
Good evening. My name is Kelia Bingham. I'm the Vice President of BVPA. Thank you for coming out tonight. You're going to advance it? Okay. Yeah, just next slide, please. Oh, well. I'll do the old-fashioned way with our fingers. Okay. So obviously, most of y'all are familiar with the river, but I just wanted to give like a brief introduction about a couple of facts about the river. So the Vermilion River, it meanders 70 miles through Lafayette, St. Martin, St. Landry, and Vermilion parishes. So I thought that's a very interesting figure. 44 miles long as a straight line. So if you take the river, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, so it'd be about 44 miles. 34 miles of the river run through Lafayette, and 8 miles of that 34 miles of the river is in the urban corridor, which can contribute to pollution. It ends where it flows into Vermilion Bay, is the end of the river. The name, which I think this is pretty cool, is due to the color of the soils. The soils in the Vermilion are red, and so the term Vermilion means red. Relatively flat as Cypress Island, Swamp, and Intracoastal City are about the same elevation, which is probably not a big surprise. Also, little known fact, the Tesh Vermilion Freshwater District, to me, is kind of like a well-kept secret that without them, we wouldn't have a steady flow and good water quality of the river. So pumping from the Tesh Vermilion Freshwater District maintains a constant flow in the river between certain rain events. Next slide, please. So we talked about the water, a couple of facts. So where does this water come from? Obviously from rainfall, from stormwater runoff. Also irrigation water releases in the Tesh Vermilion watershed contributes. Tidal influences, some people might not be familiar that Vermilion River is tidally influenced from the Vermilion Bay during storm surges. Also, going back to the Tesh Vermilion Freshwater District, the pumping station, it gets water from the Chafalaya River once the watershed drainage is complete. So this comes from the Chafalaya, from the Mississippi watershed via the Chapalaya River, helps maintain a flow. The increased flow helps restore the water supply that's ag and industry needs. Like I said earlier, it improves water quality, which is very important. And it also helps saltwater intrusion for our farmers in Vermilion Parish or the parishes along the coast. So that was a couple of just brief facts. I'm going to turn it over to Shane Miller. He's with the Department of Environmental Quality, and he'll speak to you about the river impairments. Thank you.
Good evening. As Keelia said, my name is Shane Miller. I'm with Louisiana DEQ. I'm the senior scientist over the water program for the state, so I basically cover the water program, water quality, any discharges to surface waters. So first we're going to start out with things that could be in the Vermilion River as a result of stormwater runoff. The first thing would be sediment. You have to remember that the larger particles, such as sand, are naturally going to settle faster than your lighter particles, and they would settle quicker. Your smaller clay particles are what's going to be suspended in your water column, and they tend to hang in the water column for a longer period of time, and that's what would give you the stained appearance that you see in the river. Another big one is construction activities or agriculture. A lot of construction activities around this area, and developers that don't necessarily follow the regulations can tend to contribute a lot of sediment to the river. Second, we have nutrients, which will be your fertilizers and pesticides. Those can be both from residential or agriculture. You also have parking lots, golf courses, and businesses that can both contribute these to the river. I think we've all seen the trash or the garbage in the Vermilion River. Typically, that can be directly delivered into the river, or a lot of it comes through the tributaries. Most of you have probably seen the hard boom that BVD puts out to actually catch the garbage coming out of the coulees or any other small tributary before it enters the river. And one of the big ones is the bacteria, the fecal coliform bacteria. One of the main contributor to that is animal waste. It's fecal coliform is a bacteria found in the waste of all mammals. So it could be human or any other animal. Keelia, did you want to interject with that point right here?
Great, thanks, Shane. Yeah, I just wanted to give y'all a little tidbit of information. The BVPA and LCG and BVD, I believe Vermilion Freshwater District, we did a DNA fecal coliform sampling. This was just a one-time testing. So, but I just thought the facts you would like to know is interesting. So later on you're going to see, well, we have a poster of our monitoring sites. So we tested 4 sites for fecal coliform, but the DNA to see where's the source of the fecal coliform bacteria, what kind of animal. So we had a testing site in Bayou-Catawba, Perry Bridge, Ambassador Bridge, and Surrey Street Bridge. We tested for bird, cow, dog, and human. The bird and cow was not detected at any of the sites, but dog and human was detected at the Perry, Ambassador, and Surrey Street Bridge in low levels. So it suggests that bacteria is probably coming from the urban areas. We have more people with pets, dog waste. So obviously more sampling is needed, but just like a FYI, we thought that was kind of interesting finding. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Keelia. As far as the bacteria in the river, there are a number of different reasons we have that bacteria in the river. I could stand up here and go on all night about different factors that contribute to the bacteria in the river. One of them is failing home septic systems. A lot of homes being built these days have the little individual units. A lot of times when those go out, they're really not tended to. They're not properly treating the home waste, and that's being discharged to a water body that eventually makes it to the river. You have municipal and privately owned treatment plants. We have a number of municipal wastewater treatment plants that discharge into the river or into a tributary that goes into the river. And we also have a number of privately owned wastewater companies here in the Lafayette area. There's at least 2 or 3 that I can think of, and they own small, what we call package plants, and those also discharge into the river or into tributaries. And these plants typically serve subdivisions, apartment complexes, things of that nature. Another big one is sanitary sewer overflows. Just about every municipality is prone to having sanitary sewer overflows. Most lines are old. In a heavy rain event, you get what we call I&I, or inflow and infiltration. So the lines get surcharged, and you may see sometimes here in Lafayette, when you get a heavy rain, you'll see manhole overflows. So when that happens, you do have overflows that are reaching the storm drains that could also be a contributor to the fecal bacteria in the river. Next slide. With this one, we're going to go ahead and discuss the current Vermilion River impairments. These are the current impairments that are listed on what's called the 2016 303D integrated report. The 2018 report is not out for the public yet. It's basically been put together and is out for review and will be released to the public in the near future. But for the 2016, we have the first 2 impairments. These 2 impairments would contribute to the river not being supportive of fish and wildlife propagation, which is one of the designated uses for the Vermilion River. The first impairment is dissolved oxygen. Obviously, the higher your dissolved oxygen, the better for the river, for the aquatic life in the river, and that is typically correlated to water temperature also. Then you have your nitrites. Once again, this can come from both residential and agricultural. What's being found in the Vermilion right now, the levels are not toxic, but it does supply nutrients for algae, which can result in lower dissolved oxygen numbers. And then you also have, one of the uses for the Vermilion is primary contact recreation, which is swimming, and the Vermilion is not supporting or not fully supporting of that designated use either. Main reason is the fecal coliform bacteria. Next slide. Okay, we'll take a look at who is helping to improve the water quality. One of the first one is farmers. Farmers can apply best management practices to their agricultural land to limit what they have coming off their property going to the waterways. Also, you have the Master Farmers Program along with your soil and water conservation districts also. State Department of Environmental Quality, the work that we do with the local agencies, along with enforcing our regulations on these facilities that discharge to our water bodies. Business and industry, they also follow guidelines set by regulatory agencies, which it helps out. You have parishes and municipalities that treat discharges to acceptable limits and also provide solid waste management in the form of landfills. You have tax millages that fund the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District and the Bayou Vermilion District. You have volunteer groups who also devote their time to improving the conditions in the river. And you have your citizens who properly dispose of their waste, such as recycling used oil, not littering or dumping, and composting. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some of the improvements that we have because of these efforts. We do have improvements in the bacteria levels as the fecal coliform numbers have lessened over time. But even though those numbers have gone down, don't be fooled by that, because fecal coliform is still an impairment on the integrated report, and it was an impairment 2 years prior in 2014. So that's one thing that has stayed on that integrated report. You also have, we do have 2 impairments that were removed from the list. These 2 were on the 2014 integrated report, and they were removed from the 2016. So we do have some improvements. You have your carbofurans, which is directly related to agriculture, and they also removed total dissolved solids, or TDS. The lower end of the Vermilion River, as defined by Department of Environmental Quality, the upper end did not have the TDS impairment, but the lower end, which is from Ambassador Caffrey Bridge down to the Intracoastal Waterway, did have the total dissolved solids, and that one has been removed. So that's an improvement also. Due to efforts, from the developers, when you have subdivisions, shopping centers being built due to their efforts by farmers, you have less sediment in the water. Due to public education, you have less trash that's being thrown into the river. Increased awareness of storm drains. That's something that's one of the things that's handled by Lafayette Consolidated Government through their MS4 program, educating the public on basically what goes in the storm drain ends up in the river. Increased flow in the river, which increases dissolved oxygen and helps to reduce fecal coliform. Fish kills are rare as compared to the past and less serious compared to back before the water was pumped by Teche Vermilion Freshwater District. Back then, they had a number of fish kills and a lot more serious than what we see now. Also, public interest has sparked a sense of ownership of the river. And the river is recognized as an economic asset for commerce and ecotourism. Next slide. So basically, why do we monitor the river? Number one, obviously to measure the health of the river, as fish need oxygen to survive, and for a stable pH of the river. And to also enhance the Vermilion's ability to support recreation and fish and wildlife propagation. We'll have Mr. Donald Segrera now.
Thank you, Shane. My name is Donald Segrera. For those who don't know me, I'm Executive Director of Teche Vermilion Freshwater District, and I have been a member of Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association since its beginning, and I'm very proud to be a member of the organization. I think the biggest benefit of BVPA is the fact that we have a group of people with common interest working together to improve conditions on the river and on Bayou Vermilion, as well as the rest of the watershed. But I think included in our group are not only volunteers, but also groups of agencies that share resources as well as knowledge to make conditions better. One of the things that BVPA is working on right now is a monitoring project on in the watershed, both Bayou Vermilion, Vermilion River, and Bayou Teche. So we have this long-term monitoring program. It's multi-agency, so we have to have a lot of team members because we sample from 18 sites in the river on the same day. So the team members, we have members from Teche Vermilion Freshwater District, Bayou Vermilion District, 7th Ward Drainage District, Vermilion Parish Police Jury, St. Landry Parish, and Lafayette Consolidated Government. So we have all of these team members are collecting samples on the same day so that they can be compared with one another. Next slide, please. So this is a map that shows the different sample sites. It's kind of blurry here, but we do have a good picture of the map itself in the back if you'd like to take a look at where those sample sites are before you leave. But the sample sites start up here. This is where the pump station is near the Atchafalaya, and we are collecting a sample from the Atchafalaya. And we have different points where samples are collected on Bayou Teche as well as Bayou Vermilion, all the way through the watershed. The biggest part of the project started in 2015. There were some samples being collected before, but we started the team effort where we covered the whole watershed in 2015. The samples are collected monthly. There's 18 sample sites that are analyzed for 17 parameters. There are 5 parishes that are sampled and 14 different stakeholders. The stakeholders are the things that I think helps to add credibility to the project because they include members from universities, they include DEQ, they include the Ag Center. All of these people help us to make sure that the samples that we are collecting are being collected properly and that we're following the proper protocols. Next slide, please. This is an example of us being out on sample date. We like to use the boat at certain sample sites. Some of them are on bridges, and some of the bridges it's actually safer to be collecting in a boat than it is on the bridge. Additionally, sampling in a boat allows you to collect your samples directly in sample containers, which is a very important protocol, especially for fecal coliform. Next slide. These are the parameters that we have analyzed. Some of them we read directly in the field from meters. That would be the first 6 that are listed. Of course, dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, conductivity, total dissolved solids, and turbidity. All of these are monitored because they're all indications of the health of the watershed. The next parameters are collected in sample bottles and taken to a lab for lab analysis. We also do observations of what sites look like in the field. We look for the presence of dead fish, and I'll show you when we look at some results in a few minutes. We did observe one time a dead fish after the flood of 2016. Other than that, we have never seen any dead fish. We look for the presence of trash. One of the things I'd like to comment on trash is that we are not seeing people actually throwing trash in the river like you did years ago. I think they're starting to get the message. Most of the trash that we see in the river is coming when you have rain. It's coming from rainfall runoff. It's the stuff that is thrown in ditches and parking lots or washing into the river. We also look for unusual conditions, such as algae blooms or anything else that we might see that's unusual. And we're also monitoring for saltwater intrusion. Next slide. Just some of the results that we've been finding. The highest temperature that we found was August of 15, it was right at 90 degrees, and the lowest temperature was this year in January of about 41 degrees. It's usually the highest temperature in August and lowest in January. As far as pH is concerned, the limits or the recommendation is for it to be between 6 and 9, and we are finding that to be the case with all of the samples that we've taken. All of them have been within this range. Next slide, please. So this slide shows what we were finding when we were monitoring for saltwater intrusion. It's total dissolved solids along with conductivity. And the way we reported this, starting up in the northern part of the watershed with the conveyance channel, coming downstream, Ruth Canal, Orneville Bridge, Ambassador, going into Vermilion Parish, all the way down to Intracoastal City, we can see that, and as Shane pointed out, total dissolved solids is no longer an impairment. So we are being successful in eliminating saltwater intrusion, because you can see that these samples, which came from Sycamore Point and Fearman, as well as the Intracoastal Canal, all are, and this is the range that is suitable for irrigation water. So we can see that once you get out of the Vermilion into Vermilion Bay, the salt water is there. So we are being successful in eliminating and making the water suitable for irrigation, all the way down to the to Intracoastal City. Next slide. Nitrite was one of the nutrients that we're measuring. We're measuring it at 5 different locations. This is the detection limit of 0.2, and you can notice, 0.5, but in most cases, it's below the detection limit for nitrite. So we're really happy about that. We think that the efforts towards managing fields and managing fertilizers are paying off. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, could you back up one? This is the limit for toxicity. As Shane pointed out, nitrate is an impairment, but not because it's toxic. It's very much below the toxic limit. The reason we don't want nitrate in the water is because it supplies nutrients for algae growth. Next slide, and this is for phosphorus. Whenever we first started doing the analysis, the lab was using a detection limit of 0.5, and we collected for several months, and they never did detect any. So we talked to Ron Bustani about that, and he recommended asking the lab to drop that limit, which we did, and they had to sub it out to another lab where they could detect amounts of 0.2, and occasionally we are picking up some phosphorus, but it's not enough to be considered an impairment. Next. Dissolved oxygen, as we've said before, is very related to temperature, and so you can see as you go through the summer, dissolved oxygen content drops, and then it comes back up as it cools off in the fall. Whenever the Tesh Vermilion pumps are running, these are those spikes where we're getting the higher oxygen content, because these are the dissolved oxygen contents that we're finding in the samples that are taken from the conveyance channel. So it shows that it is contributing to increasing dissolved oxygen content in the watershed. This is what happened after the flood of 2016, where the water sat in different low-lying areas for several months. It took 6 weeks to drain that flood, so there was no movement of the water, and you can see how that stagnation led to those low concentrations of dissolved oxygen. And this is the limit, this is the range of dissolved oxygen where we did find dead fish. It's the only time that we did since we've been monitoring. Next slide. This is one that shows fecal coliform contents, and this is the average that we found at each one of these locations from May of 2016 to May of 2018. So this is 25 samplings. 8 of those samplings were taken when the pumps were running, and the 17 were taken whenever the pumps were not running. So the watershed had runoff water in it at the time. It had water from within the watershed. So you can see the difference. The water that is in the Atchafalaya River is very low in fecal coliform as compared to the water within the watershed. So you can see that at every location throughout the 2-year period, Atchafalaya River had substantially lower fecal counts than did the water from within the watershed. Next slide. I put this slide in because this is what I know everyone would wish you could see in the Vermilion River. Not the salt content, but the point is the water that we see in Destin is beautiful. It does not contain any clay particles to stain it, so that's the difference. If the source of the water that runs over sandy terrain and picks up sand, that water will settle out and clear up very quickly. In our watershed, it's not that way. The water flows over land that has clay particles in it, so our water retains those clay particles for a long time. Next slide. This is my wrap-up slide, and I wanted to put it here to this is what the Vermilion River looks like near Intracoastal City. I wanted to also use it to thank you for being here with us today and for your interest that you have in the watershed. I will be here after the meeting. If anybody has any questions about our project, I'll be happy to answer them. Again, thank you for your interest. Heather?
Thanks, Donald. We just have a couple more slides to go through this, and then I will allow a couple questions from the floor if people have something. So, Bess, can you? Okay, so those of you guys who know me know that I'm a retired biologist from Wildlife and Fisheries. So, and one of the deals is propagation of wildlife, right? And so I wanted to just kind of characterize what we see in the Vermilion River. Next slide. Right, so as you would expect, in most of the stretch of the river, we see freshwater species, game species such as largemouth bass, and also crappie, black crappie, and then non-game species, various kinds of catfish, bowfin, buff, goose, et cetera, et cetera. And we also, excuse me, we now are host 2 species of Asian carp. So, okay, next. Can I? Yeah, thanks. And then, as you saw in Donald's presentation, as we get down towards the mouth of the river in Vermilion Bay, we also have coastal fish species. And so here's an example of what you might find: red drum, black drum, southern flounder, mullet, croaker, sheep's head. And then sometimes, in some years, when we've had really, really high salinities, we may even see speckled trout and sand sea trout up into the reaches of the river. So very sort of typical, I think, for a coastal river. A nice suite of freshwater species at the north end, and some nice coastal species at the south end. And I just wanted to wrap that up. Let's see. One more? Yeah. Oh, sorry. So Wildlife and Fisheries, does sample the river periodically. The last time it was sampled was in the fall of 2015. And you see the list of species that they caught, the electrofish. And so at 3 stations, at Beaver Park, at Elwha Broussard Road, and at the Highway 14 in Abbeville. At the same time, they're also taking water quality samples. And I just want you to take a look. You notice now, so these samples are taken in the fall, and they have fairly healthy looking dissolved oxygen levels at 5.4. Again, so that's going to be like a one-day thing, right? But anyway, enough to sort of kind of indicate that things are looking good. And they'll be sampling again in 2020. And when I asked Wildlife and Fisheries that's the reason that I have their logo up is because they provided these data, and they also, just as an aside or as an addition, to say, here's some places where you can bank fish, right, on the river. It's not, I know this is not an exhaustive list because it doesn't include the Southside Park, which BVD administers. But anyway, so here are some spots where it's possible to bank fish for some of these species. So I think we have a couple more slides. Are you going to do them? Bess? Yeah. Just, you had a couple more slides you wanted to go through? Okay. And then, yeah.
We just wanted to point out real quick that another project, a couple of projects that we've worked with other agencies are with our, it's actually the Garden Club sponsors a litter poster contest for elementary students and middle school students. And these are some of the winners from this year, the 3 posters that we're showing there. There were others. And the BVPA decided we wanted to try to get a little bit, more participation. We offer prizes to those students now, and so we're really excited to partner with the Garden Club for that, because a lot of times the theme of those litter posters is the connection between the litter on the land makes it into the water, and really, the kids start to learn about that ends up down the storm drains into our waterways. So we're excited about that. And then also the picture at the top is rain barrels, and a few years ago we started working with some years high school students, some years middle school students, offering art classes or science classes, the rain barrels for the classes to paint. And that's through Lafayette Consolidated Government, and LUS provides the rain barrels. And the students can, we try to get them to do something, ecological on those barrels. But after they're done, they came out so great. This is high school this year that BVPA, we offer them up for auction. And then that's something that people can then buy those barrels, and some of the funds go back to the schools for them to do a little beautification or some plantings or something around their schools. And some of the proceeds go back to the BVPA for us to then continue on and do, more of these projects with schools and education. So we just wanted to kind of highlight that, because it's something that, once again, several different agencies getting the word out and really getting kids involved, which is obviously a big part of the future for water quality and anti-litter. So I don't know if I think there might be another slide. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is just back to, once again, getting more information about all of our programs, becoming a member. Facebook, it shows a lot of different programs. Like when we want to get people out on the river for the BVD boat parade, if you have anything that you want us to promote that we can cross over, please let us know, because we like to, social media is a big part of everybody's life now. So, I think this is a time where we were going to take some questions for Shane, or any of us have any questions about anything that we were presented today.
Well, okay then. Okay, go ahead.
When you, in the fecal E. coli area, when you're located close to a body of water, are there different requirements for residential wastewater treatment, and is there different inspection protocol or anything like that?
If you're talking about the individual treatment units that are on homes, what I call the little WHO-type units, those actually are not regulated by the Department of Environmental Quality. They fall under the Department of Health and Hospitals. So there, a lot of times we get complaints regarding those types of systems, or just some type of discharge directly from a home or from a mobile home. But when you have that situation, that is, like I said, it does not fall under our jurisdiction. It is DHH. So, for me to say they have specific limits or, what exactly they look at, you would, need to contact them. Yeah, I mean, if you can file a complaint with the health department, and they'll typically send someone out. Unlike us, DEQ does accept anonymous complaints. With the health department, it's not anonymous. You actually have to go in, file the complaint, sign for it, and they will typically, investigate it. But it is under their jurisdiction.
All right, thanks. I would like now to take the opportunity to introduce someone that you guys probably have heard from in the past. We have with us Mr. Jesse Guidry, who's now with the Lafayette Convention and Visitors Bureau, but he's a river supporter, and he's been doing that for a long time, and he's going to talk a little bit about what kinds of now that we know that the water quality is improving, he's going to talk about a little bit about what kinds of recreational opportunities are available.
I'm going to do this. Hey, everybody. Jesse Guidry. I work for Lafayette Travel. A little background about me, why I'm here. I actually worked for Bayou Vermilion District in Vermilionville way back. That's how my relationship with the river first began. I was kind of tasked with promoting recreation along the river, and so I thought if I was going to do that, I sure as heck better be paddling it and know what I'm talking about. So I bought a kayak and just started paddling. I paddled the length of that river multiple times, and I can say over the course of the past 8-9 years that I've been doing this, I went from seeing hardly anybody paddling on the river whenever I first started out to I can't go out on the river now without seeing a handful of people, or even driving. You'll notice there's more kayaks on cars going along the river. More people have canoes. There's more boats. There's more. It's I think we're coming to a tipping point with the river, which makes me, and I'm sure a lot of people that have been doing this way longer than me, really happy. So that's a little bit about my background. I still maintained a relationship with BVD in Vermilionville whenever I went to Lafayette Travel. And one of the things they asked me to talk about is recreation. If you guys were here at the last symposium that they had, I talked a little bit about an event that I was working with Greg on through work called the Vermilion Voyage. And we did it. We had our first one. I'm going to go ahead and say it was successful. And just to kind of give you guys an idea of what that looked like, we did a video, which y'all are the first ones that are going to see it. Oh, I may need to hold the mic up to the sound.
A 3-day overnight excursion. Lafayette Travel has partnered with the Bayou Vermilion District to be able to offer this to the public, starting from the nature station and ending at Palmetto Island State Park.
It really was a voyage. You know, we do like the 21 miles, and then we do the 17, and then we do the last 12, and then like when we got here, it was like, oh my God, like we paddled a long way.
Each person has conquered the river individually, right? Even a person in a boat, like those two people were paddling individually, each had a paddle, and they conquered the river, each and every one of them. And yeah, it's like they just won a victory. Tried to get his schedule to work with mine, and so we could get down here. He missed 3 days of school.
These guys were from Cincinnati.
Over the last
They drove down from Ohio.
Probably a semester's worth of real school.
And what I liked is seeing the transition from like Lafayette Lafayette and then going into the country, and the further away you get from civilization, like the transition, I thought it was really neat, man. And then you start getting more country, you got some cows, and you're like, okay, this is why I'm here.
I'm from Ohio, so I've lived here about 4 or 5 years, and I've tried different pieces of the culture here, and I've never felt so immersed in it as I have the last 3 days. I definitely didn't expect people to be my age, but when I got here and there was a whole bunch of girls, I was like, this is gonna be cool.
Can you believe we did this? It was wide open. Couldn't believe there were no mosquitoes. Couldn't believe the weather was so perfect. It's wide open.
I've never been down to Vermilion, so that was neat and exciting. Never seen the sail barn. I never knew that Southside Park was there. So there's a few things that I've learned and I've seen that was pretty interesting.
I've always been of the mind that it's very important to know your country and where you live. And this is a really cool way to see it, because you can drive by stuff and see roads, but coming up the river, you see backsides that you don't see, and you also get to watch the river progress. It starts small, and it goes out as it goes out to the Gulf. It gets bigger and bigger, and it's just cool.
I mean, like the added bonus going to the dockside studio.
That was awesome.
Yeah, meeting the lady that owns the studio. It's like musical heritage history, and then later that night getting to see Roddy Romero, who I've never even heard the name before because I'm a little bit ignorant about the culture, but I'm up to speed now, so I think I'll be downloading some stuff.
It was totally worth it in the end. Just to pull into this spot over here and know that we had paddled over 50 miles was such an amazing accomplishment. And then you experience all this culture at the same time, way more than we bargained for in a good way.
The food, the music, the culture. I mean, just the food alone blows people away. But then you spend a weekend here and go to a couple bars, live music performances, meet some folks.
I would say just do it. Just do it. For me, this is where I'm from, so I get to see the place that I love from a totally different point of view. I mean, it's special seeing the place that you live from the water. So I would just say do it. Well, don't be scared. Just do it.
Just do it. So that was a lot of fun. And, before I came up with this concept, one of the other things I did while I was over here worked with Margot doing the boat parade, which just had its 7th celebration, which I still, can't believe I'm happy it's still going on. But whenever I was planning it for the first year, I didn't have I was telling this to Heather, I didn't have a whole lot of support. People were kind of like, you're going to do what on where, and nobody's going to show up. And, Griff was one of the main people that helped me kind of get volunteers out, and he really believed in it. And now I think it's come to a point where it's this thing people look forward to. And this is kind of the second iteration of that. And the whole point of this, going back to the slide in terms of what these guys were talking about, the public interest has sparked a sense of river ownership. One of the things why I do all of this, because you can have anti-littering campaigns, you can go in the schools, you can try to teach these kids. All of those people, those 27 people that came out on the water I'd venture to say about 25 of them had never paddled that river before, ever. They now have a relationship with that river. They started asking questions. Why is there this big farm trash? Why this? Why that? The interest is piqued. Now they're stewards of the river. They believe in it, and I firmly believe that recreation is the gateway to understanding, because once you get people on the river, it's theirs. I don't want anybody trashing my river. The understanding comes. It's a very easy way to get people on the river. So that's why I do, and I'm pretty sure that's why Greg keeps working with me on these harebrained schemes, is just to get more people on the water and aware and paddling. And just to speak, there's another thing that was brought up about ecotourism, speaking about what I do for Lafayette Travel, because we promote Lafayette Parish for visitors to come here. That's why I was able to do the Vermilion Voyage as part of my job. It's considered product development. But I've seen an increase in interest, not only with people walking into our visitor center, but just online inquiries and even visitation to our camping, hiking, fishing pages, birding pages that we have. Everything is going way up. I mean, this is a treasure that a lot of people just kind of look at it and they're like, oh, whatever, the river. But these people, they don't view it as that. It's exotic. It's something to be treasured, and something you can't get anywhere. So people are interested in this, and all you need to do is have an idea, do it, and package it, and get it out there. And that's all we're doing. And in terms of recreation, I don't know what else you guys want me to cover, but I know that there's, and I'm kind of speaking to the wrong people here because you guys are pretty much all aware of what BVD, BVPA, and all the other organizations do in terms of how you can get on the water, where the canoe kayak launches are. BVD now has a rental, or is going to be having a canoe rental program. They offer beginner paddling classes, once a month. There's a lot of ways to get on the river, both paddling, fishing, and then just passive. I mean, I think Southside Park is probably one of the most beautiful parks that we have. And everybody that, when we spent the night there for the Vermilion Voyage, nobody knew that existed, and they were completely blown away. So, to take a little thing from Field of Dreams, I think if you build it, they really will come. There is an interest for all of this, and everything, all of these efforts that everybody's doing, both on the scientific side, the recreation side, and the education side, I really do believe that all of those things are really starting to come together in a big way, and the scales are going to tip. I've seen it over the past 8-9 years. I'm sure everybody that's been doing this way longer than me has seen a lot of positive change as well. So thank you guys for your support. You want to do questions, or does anybody? The 2019 dates are up for Vermilion Voyage. It's going to be in March. So if anybody wants to participate in that, the premise of it is basically it's a 3-day, 50-mile guided overnight paddle. Each evening we camp out, and we provide all your food, your craft, everything. And then each evening we have various forms of entertainment. The first night we did a drive-in movie. In the Mind of the Maker is what we showed this year. It was a film about this guy who builds Creole skiffs from his mind's eye, no blueprints. So that was pretty cool. We watched that actually on the water. The second night in Abbeville, we did the Richard Sailborn, which you guys saw with Roddy Romero, another treasure that a lot of people don't get to see or even know about. The third day, the second day, we stopped at Dockside Studio for our lunch, which was really great because not a lot of people get to tour that or even get to see inside of that historic studio. So that was a nice little treat. And then the owner came out and told us hi and showed us around, which was great. And then the third night, we ended up at Palmetto Island State Park and did a really great midnight canoe trail paddle where I saw fireflies for the first time in my life, which was pretty cool. So anyway, so that's the basic premise of it. But if you know anybody that's interested, we're trying to build this thing up every year to just get it more, more exposure. So thank y'all.
Okay, well, thanks, Jesse. Kind of to wrap up, we have one more speaker, and actually, he's going to talk about Bayou Vermilion District and some of the programs that they have going on. And so, Mr. Greg Guidros, the Director of Environmental Education, Environmental Awareness, at BVD.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Okay. So, definitely covered a lot, education-wise, understanding the river, understanding water quality. This presentation is, do you have the little clicker? Do you have the, no? Okay. It doesn't work? Okay. So, Bayou Vermilion District established in 1984, which was prior to the Vermilion River being the most polluted river in the United States in 1976. So these are some maps from LDEQ's 2016 integrated report. You can see we have primary contact recreation, which is swimming, where you're actually getting in the water, you're getting water all over you. There's still lots of parts of the river that's not actually meeting the requirements. However, you can see that we are meeting quite a bit of the requirements for secondary recreation. So that means the bayou is safe to get out and paddle without fear of getting any sort of bacterial infection. Let's see. So next, these red lines are for fish and wildlife propagation. A lot of this was already covered, so I'll just kind of breeze through it. I did not know that turbidity, or TDS, was actually removed from the list of impairments, so that's really good. And just to touch on something, as we were talking about the suspended solids not being present in the northern parts of the river, but being present more in the south, that's actually not a bad thing, because that's building marsh and deltaic zones, so that's actually where we want that sediment to actually end up. Turbidity, fecal coliform, dissolved oxygen. Trash is actually not listed as an impairment, but it is a big issue when we start talking about the river. So I was here in 2001, whenever BVD first started implementing the oil containment booms for collecting trash. And prior to sticking those booms out in some of the coulees, every time it would rain, we would start a stopwatch. And 30 minutes after the first drop of rain starts falling, there's a train, a river of trash that would just start parading down the Vermilion every single time it rained. So the director at that time was Jimmy Akers. He was like, why don't we use oil field containment booms? So that's exactly what we did. We started putting them in the coulees, maintaining the trash, and that way we could actually contain it and remove it. Since 2001, BVD's removed 5,375 cubic yards of litter from the bayou. If you can imagine all the people that show up in Girard Park once a year for Festival Acadiana and Creole, every piece of trash that's produced by that festival, that's about how much trash we pull out of the river every single year. It's pretty impressive, actually. Oh, and in 2013, BVD and LCG teamed up and went in on the Bandalon system, which is actually located in Coulee Meme. Coulee Meme is one of the largest contributing coulees to the Bayou Vermilion, and this system is a more automated system where the debris collects in here. This is an automatic gate, so LCG actually sends a cherry picker over every couple months, or maybe even once a month. I'm not sure exactly how often it gets dumped, but basically the cherry picker comes, it lifts this, and it dumps it into a big dumpster, puts it back, we fill the basket up, and what would have taken about 3 days for the crew to clean up now takes about 4 hours. So that's a ton of improvement right there. Next. All right, so in 2015, we started a Recycle Bin Loan Program, and this was in conjunction with the Keep Louisiana Beautiful grant. I can't see, so I'm gonna do this. How about that? So since 2015, we've grown from 4 events using the recycle bins. In 2017, we had 21 events who've come to BVD saying, those bins are great, we'd like to use them for our event, and we've saved 560 cubic yards of recyclable material. We're talking about aluminum cans, lots of aluminum cans, lots of plastic bottles, and cardboard, all being saved from going into the landfills. This past year, Scott Boudin Festival actually started implementing recycling as a part of the Boudin Festival. There was a little mix-up. I had brought some recycle bags, and there was a little communication difficulties. They didn't know where the bags ended up. They were actually in City Hall, but the people who were actually changing out the bins didn't know that. So we ended up with black plastic bags in all of the bins, the recycling and the trash bins. But that blue lid with the 3 holes in it, when I went to collect the bins on Monday morning, even though there was a black trash bag in the recycle bin, there was not any trash in the recycle bin. It was all aluminum cans and all plastic. So the citizens of Lafayette, Scott, the surrounding area, people are starting to catch on. People are starting to understand. We have a success rate, about 34% of the total waste that we collect is actually a recyclable material, which is pretty much on line for the national average. Next slide. Here you go, is a picture of the cans right there. That's actually at Festival Acadien et Creole, and they're clear, perfect. If you ever see them out there, use them. Next. So, in 2016, maybe a couple people from HDR still here. So BVD did a dissolved oxygen study in the river to see what was the issue with dissolved oxygen. So we did a study area of the entire length of the Vermilion River, about 35 miles, and then they did a second study, which was just from I-10 to Evangeline Thruway. And the question was, what would it take to get the river's DO levels up to 5 milligrams per liter, which is what is suggested for fish and wildlife propagation, so we could delist it from LDEQ's list. Unfortunately, the DO problem is a lot bigger than we can handle. If you see this right here, so this is a map of 2017's dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So the issue of low dissolved oxygen levels in the Bayou Vermilion is not unique. It's something that we're dealing with on a national level. So every time there's nitrates, nitrites, phosphorus, any sort of fertilizers getting into the river system, it fuels that algae bloom in the Gulf, and the waters go hypoxic. In Lafayette, in our zone, basically, for 7 months out of the year, we're below 5 milligrams per liter, but still the fisheries are doing somewhat pretty good. I think our fish down here are kind of used to low oxygen levels in the water. So some of the conclusions from the study, oxygen injection is not necessary whenever the temperatures of the water are below 17 degrees Celsius. Colder water tends to hold on to oxygen more readily. So 7 out of 12 months, the levels in the river are below the 5 milligrams per liter standard that is set by DEQ and Wildlife and Fisheries. Real world applications, what would it take to get that water in the bayou up to par on dissolved oxygen? So the best way to take care of that is to maintain the oxygen level into the sources that are going directly into the river. So if there was a way to work with municipalities, all the water, all that effluent that's coming through the city lines into the sewer systems, if we could manage a handle on getting that water, we would greatly be able to improve the oxygen levels. Donald mentioned how the pumping station from Catawba, just the action of those pumps just sends the oxygen levels pretty high up there. And I'm not sure how long that oxygen will actually hold in a column of water, but that's pretty much what it would take. Some of the recommendations from the study was that just keeping a better handle on monitoring the oxygen levels, doing demonstration projects, working with local wastewater treatment plants to see what we can do to keep that effluent at a high level of dissolved oxygen. And here you go. So, in turn, next slide. So just recently, actually this past year, BVD partnered with USGS. We now have extra monitoring stations on Surrey Street. So if you go to USGS site to check out the river gauge levels, there are now dissolved oxygen levels, turbidity levels, and specific conductivity levels being taken real time at Surrey Street, which will give us a better idea over time of what the oxygen levels in the river are actually doing. So check that out. That's actually online right now. I think it went live not too long ago, maybe March or something. There you go. So here's the new parameters. You can see we got specific conductivity, dissolved oxygen, and turbidity. So March 2018, those went live, and those graphs are on there. You just gotta log into the site, and you can pull it up. Actually, if you if you search for Vermilion River at Surrey Street USGS, it's one of the first things that pop up on the Google. Dealing with turbidity, dealing with runoff coming from agricultural lands, the Lafayette Soil and Water Conservation District came to us and said, hey, look, we have this seed drill program that we're offering in multiple parishes. We need a place to put this seed drill. So if you know any farmers that have any sort of riparian buffer strip zone that need to plant it with any sort of buffer plants, there's a seed drill. They just go to Soil and Water Conservation District. They'll reserve it from them, and then the farmers come over to us, pick up the seed drill, drive it out to their property, do their planting, and then bring it back. So BVD basically houses the unit and maintains the unit. Since the program was started, 381.8 acres of buffer zones have been planted since 2016. Next slide. So this is a picture of the seed drill, pretty good sized machine. And then this next slide, next. So if you look right here, this water is actually a little bit clearer than this water right here. So this is a typical soybean machine, a soybean field. Sugarcane fields, for every tablespoon of sugar we produce, we actually lose about 3 tablespoons of soil to runoff. So being able to maintain that runoff, keeping it on land is extremely important. That's really good fertile soil. When it's on the land, it's doing what it needs to do. Once it gets into the water, it's actually causing problems. So by creating those buffer zones and those buffer strips, when the water coming off of your field is cleaner or clearer than the water in the bayou, you're actually making progress. So that's pretty much what we would want to see coming off of a farm field. Non-point source pollution reduction through on-site sewer septic system inspection program. So this is a really fantastic program. This program was actually first started in the Calcasieu watershed out in Lake Charles, and DEQ has been basically taking that program and spreading it throughout the state. So in July 17, BVD basically was able to partner with LDEQ, and the funds are coming from the EPA's 319 fund program, and we're focusing specifically on the Coulee-Mean watershed, because the Coulee-Mean watershed, number one, it's one of the largest contributing coulees to the Vermilion in Lafayette Parish, and two, just about the entire smaller sub-watershed of Coulee-Mean is located within Lafayette Parish, so we're able to stay within our jurisdiction boundaries for the Bayou-Vermilion District, and then get this program off the ground. So basically we have a team of inspectors. They go out to the houses. We have 944 individual septic systems within the Coulee-Mean watershed. BVD goes out to the houses, knocks on doors, meets with the people, checks the systems. They're checking for the aeration unit, make sure the aeration unit's working. They're checking to make sure that the unit is below the 50% sludge level. A lot of those systems, Mother Nature is amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. The more I learn about it, the more fascinated I become about the earth. But nature has a way of breaking down and cleansing itself. So by putting that water into those sewer systems, we're just facilitating the natural process of cleaning the water. If there's too much sludge in those systems, there's not enough space for that water to go through the cleansing process. So oftentimes, just pumping out your system and creating more headspace for that water to go through the process is enough to get your system back into compliance. So that has a lot to do with it. Let's see. I think some of the numbers are... Oh, and also, LDEQ is actually sampling 18 different locations. Now, this is actually in addition to some of the locations that Donald and BVPA are doing throughout the entire watershed. These 18 locations are specifically in the Coulee-Mean watershed to get an idea of the progress of the program. So this is a map. All the red dots are individual septic systems. The green dots are the sampling locations where DEQ is keeping tabs. And you can see this little cutout right here. This is the extent of the Coulimim drainage basin within the parish. Okay, well, actually, let me just go back a couple slides. There we go. So, since the program started, 348 systems have been inspected. Of those initial inspections, 70% of them were failing. That means 70% of those systems were not cleaning the water up to standards. After that, they went and re-inspected 171 systems. So now we've decreased the failure rate from 70% to 38% just by educating citizens. I think there are still a couple systems. Wes, maybe you can help me out with this. But basically, BVD gives you 3 chances. After getting inspected 3 times, if your system's still failing, we just turn your name over to DHH, and now you have to deal with the Department of Health and Hospitals, who it is their jurisdiction to actually do give you the fines and get you back into compliance from there. So there is some progress going on, but it's definitely a struggle. A lot of times it's just a matter of educating people. Recreational opportunities on the bayou. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of blue on that secondary recreation map, and we're definitely trying to get people out on the water. We offer beginner canoe lessons. So I think we do 6 beginner lessons a year, where we keep people in the pond. People who have never gotten a boat before, we go over paddle strokes, basics of canoeing safety. After that, if you're still interested in pursuing your goals of becoming a paddler, we do intermediate guided paddle trips where we have a safety boat that actually follows the group just in case your skills aren't to par. And then we also initiated a brand new canoeing kayak rental program. Actually, it was not the easiest thing to find a lawyer to actually sign off on some waivers that limit the liability of the district. However, I think we set up the program to where we can get people safely out on the river. We'll give you a boat, you'll get a map, and then paddlers can actually share their location via Google Maps, and then we can track people from Vermilionville and then keep an eye on them while they're going out into the river. And we do only offer a number of paddle trips, so you won't just get a boat and go wherever you want. Yeah, we give you a couple routes that you can take. We have the annual Bayou Vermilion Boat Parade and Festival, thanks to Mr. Jesse Guidry, and then also the Vermilion Voyage, which you guys have. There you go. That's what the boat parade looks like. Lots of people, lots of fun. It was great. This past Sunday, I think we had a really good attendance. I think we were up in the 300 people again. So people are really enjoying the boat parade. This is paddle routes. So the 2 paddle routes available. Go back. Oh, there we go. So the 2 paddle routes we offer are from the nature station down to Vermilionville, which is about 3.5, 4-hour paddle, or you can do a round trip. You leave Vermilionville, go down into the Bayou Tartu system, and then come back. I've actually done this one a couple times, and there is a bicycle route that just cuts straight to Acadiana Park. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes to get there on a bicycle. So it's a really nice way of doing some multi-travel. These are the parks that we have as a part of the Bayou Vermilion District. We have the North Landing, which is the northernmost public access point right now, which is located underneath I-10. We partnered with LCG and Acadiana Park Nature Station. We have a canoeing kayak launch. Out there we have, let's see. We have Vermilionville, Beaver Park, Landing, there's Rotary Point, there's a canoe dock underneath the Camellia Bridge, which is where the boat parade ends, and we also have Southside Park. So all of these are public access facilities maintained by the district, and the newest of our properties is 4.5 acres right at the tri-parish boundary line. So this is Bayou Fusilier, this is Bayou Carencro. They meet and become the Bayou Vermilion, and BVD now owns this 4.5 acre piece of land, which is actually very important because that completes the connection of the river throughout the entire parish of Lafayette. So this little piece of paddle trail that was missing is now complete with this land. Now we still have to develop it, we still have to get things done to be able to create that into a public access point, but the process is rolling and we're well on our way. Just a little bit more about the Vermilion Voyage. So you can see this little red line is the entire length of the voyage. So this is Nature Station right here. We came down, and the first night was at Southside Park, thanks to Jesse and his crew. Some really great pictures out there. So Nature Station, Southside Park, Dockside Studios. This was one of my favorite stops. The sunset at Reshore Sailborn is absolutely amazing. The river just makes this nice little bend, and you're staring directly into the sunset. If you ever get a chance to get on the river, that is one place that you would really enjoy, just kind of spending the night. Finishing up at Palmetto Island. So that's the Vermilion Voyage. And then also just continuing progress on the paddle trail. I forget what year it was that we started the first part, but we teamed up with BVPA, LCG, CGI to initiate the first part of the paddle trail project, just identifying locations. CGI threw it on a web server, which is actually housed on the LCG GIS network. So lots of partnerships going on and lots of progress being made. And looking towards the future, these are some of the things we've worked on and what we're looking forward to showing up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. La Cuisine de Mama is going to be doing a post-consumer food waste composting program. So we have an enclosed vessel, which is just this huge stainless steel tube with a stainless steel paddle inside. We did audit of the restaurant. Great food, love it, everybody loves it. Kind of sticks to you every once in a while. But there's a lot of waste that comes out of restaurants, right? About 50% of the waste coming out of our restaurant is either post-consumer food waste, scraps from the buffets, or it's recyclable material from the kitchen prep, right? So 50% of our waste stream coming out of the restaurant could potentially be recycled. We recycle what we can. Now we're going to be able to take that post-consumer food waste, turn it into compost, which will be able to be used on our village gardens out here, our heritage seed gardens, and looking forward to getting that up and running. BVD's actually got some plans right now. We're going to be going out to bid pretty soon. There's going to be a new building being built on our property, which is going to be on the other side of the parking lot, which is going to house a water quality lab, some offices, and we're also going to have the watershed exhibit over there and turn that area into a water quality park. And then also additional improvements to the public access facilities, building out that northern property to become another access point and completing that access. So lots of progress being made in the last couple years. BVPA and the relationships that were formed out of that are definitely helpful to getting those projects off the ground and running. And we're just continuing on, and we look forward to making more progress in the future.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Greg? Or any questions or comments just generally? We sure appreciate you guys coming out. We really wanted to share with you some of the good things that are going on our bayou and in our community. And so thanks for coming out, and thank you for supporting BVPA.